So I'd like to call the meeting to order at 3:05 p.m. This is the December 12th Board of Selectmen work session, and the meeting is being recorded by the recording clerk for record keeping. I understand that you will make a video recording. And is there anybody else who wishes to record? Seeing none, we'll move on. I don't think we need an attendance sheet, there's no notice shown, so.
Yeah.
So before we go on and just sort of jump into things, comment from the audience.
I came here for one purpose.
Yes.
I wanted to express a very deep appreciation for the work that the Board of Selectmen put in to clean up the sign. The town looks like a different town, and I really appreciate it. I know a lot of the circumstances that made it complicated, but so enough said.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That list that I gave you in the office, the bottom of it, are signs that I have seen that need to be looked into. So we're going to continue to stay on this.
I've only got 3.
Okay. If you have signs and so on, I would suggest that this may not be the way we do it forever, but for the time being, if you would make a list of where they are and where they're located, give them to Debbie. Debbie will see that.
I've got a sheet, I'll take up.
That's great. If you get it to Debbie, Debbie will see that Kevin gets it.
But I
And
did want to do that.
we're going to follow up in an organized
Because I know
manner.
it was a process.
Excellent.
Thank you, Don.
Don, thanks.
It's always good to get a
Happy
compliment.
holidays.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, we should have said thank you first. You can leave that door open because we are in
Okay.
open session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Today's purpose is, we do have a meeting on Monday, but today, the primary purpose is, the main purpose, the only purpose really, is to discuss the capital plan. Because as we started to look at it, and I asked Robin if she would come and support us with the information that she had access to that helped create this, given that this was something essentially done on her watch and under her direction. And Dick, I think you were the one who pointed out that you look at these numbers, some of them look a little scary, and how are we going to do it? And I think we need to make a little assessment now as to what are the implications for FY21 for this year's warrant, and what are we going to have to sort of be thinking about, not sort of, but thinking about as we start to go forward and making decisions on how we're going to make it all happen. So that said,
Can I make a thought
Yep.
for discussion?
absolutely.
That one of the documents that you provided for us was a review of capital items from current year
Yes.
and the status of those. Suggestion is that we spend 5 minutes, no
Sure.
more, going through that so that we see what we had put in and what was approved and where we are on it, and what we didn't put in and therefore wasn't approved.
Okay.
Well, actually, there was one that nobody put in, but except town meeting put it in, which was the roof on the library.
Right.
Okay.
But that was an exception.
Um,
But it just seems to me that that might be useful to bring everybody up to speed as to where our money's on.
Yeah, that's helpful, and that's why I included it.
Which
Thank you, yeah.
document is this? This is the one in this?
Yeah, it's actually, it wasn't bound because I got it after, but it should be an insert that looks like this.
Is this the same
It's
as
in Board
online?
Docs.
Yes.
It's
Is
in
it
Board Docs,
2020?
yes.
This is the 2020 capital requests,
Yeah.
project status 4. Oh,
Now, typically, this would, you know, had I had it in time, it would have been part of the binder, so.
okay.
But it's just an overview that I requested of Catherine about last year's projects. And you probably know more about the purpose of these projects than I. She seemed to feel that people were, that the balances weren't extraordinary and that they would be spent by the end of the fiscal year. But these come from her.
Okay.
So I think she's closed out the ones that the departments have said they're done with, but, you know, I know that there's, under ambulance, you see there's 8,200 still left, so I don't know what that means.
Just for an example, though, looking at the headings, Two of the headings are remain balance as of September 30th of this year, and the other is
Yeah.
remaining of November, so 2 months apart.
Right,
And the dollar figure in there is what has not been spent as of that date.
correct.
Okay. So the project may be done. Let's say we put 30,000 in for the project. The project only cost 25,000, so we would see in November that there's still 5,000 left.
And there may be invoices outstanding.
And there may still be monies
Yeah.
required, right? We have a whole 7 more months to go
Yes.
to use it. Well, actually, they're warrant articles, so, but within the year to use them. Yeah, okay, I understand.
And I think she's made some comments here, like, for example, down at the bottom of the first sheet, the front end loader was received September 2019. You have a balance of 12,770. Is that going to go into equipment, lights or whatever they have to do, or does it get turned back?
So just going down through the whole thing very quickly, and they're in categories: town administrator, town facilities, PEG, whatever. So on the first thing, the domain server, that's all been taken care of. Apparently all the money's been spent. I
Yes.
take it, and we're in
Correct.
great shape with that. And that happened before this fiscal year, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the document centralization, so we have $2,800 out of a total of 27,500. Well, is there any particular plan that anybody's aware of on that? I've been down there, by the way, and tried to use the plans, and I can tell you that that the plans could use additional work. But I think that project is done at this point.
Largely done. The document storage for the plans is rather costly. If you go back, there are some source documents here that would be very helpful to include in future. For example, the information from the town hall committee. Some of those costs were rather extraordinary, like the whole shelving system. I was like, this can't be possible, but it's a type of architectural shelving. But what we ended up doing, because we didn't have enough money for that, is I asked Paul to go to Home Depot and see what we can use that suits our storage.
Oh, yeah.
So it may be
Okay,
a certain standard, but it may not be the standard we need.
okay. But this 27,000 that we're looking at here was specifically for the plans. We bought $22,000 worth of shelving. The plans were put in by a consultant, somebody consulting, a third party. My comment is, though, coincidentally, I spent some time trying to find some plans, and it still needs work, I believe. There's a lot of miscellaneous,
Yeah.
and some of the stuff is not filed very well.
I think
but that's just where we are
there's
next.
more to be spent on that.
Yep, oh, okay.
But we didn't, in looking at this, another good example, let me just say, is that the town hall committee wants to spend $30,000 on curtains upstairs. But in the context of the priorities, I don't see that as a high priority.
Okay.
It'd be very nice to
Yeah.
have, but when you start getting into these priorities.
But this is very much looking at where we were a year ago
Yeah,
with things.
exactly.
And so if I just may then, so your point about going to the Home Depot and finding is really what that $18,000 is for financial records. We really haven't done anything with it. It's still there, nothing, no included, not included on the warrants last year and whatever else. Second, telecommunication services, that's in our thing, we can talk about that. That's in your plan for the coming year. 30,000, whatever. Okay, good. Then on the town facilities maintenance and repairs, that's that money that we put, so like.
We
excuse
draw
me.
down as needed, and we're also paying Paul out of that.
Okay, yeah, 25,000 left there. The generator was pulled and is not back on yet
Not
in
yet,
anything. The police station plumbing is back on,
all of it.
right? Okay, so that one's back on. Audio visual, so that, nothing, we allocated the monies, but none of it has been spent, that's fine, there's not a big deal there, the total is $6,000. The police station, SUV cruiser, we actually got it, we should have it by now, right? Yet, no, we didn't.
We haven't
So we
gotten
still
it.
have, we haven't received it yet, okay. So we still have $60,000, but that's in place. Portable radios,
That's in this next,
it's done,
Plan.
right?
it's in the next plan.
Well,
The portable radios, this is year-end appropriation.
we
transfer.
never appropriated it?
No, some we did.
Yeah, year-end
This is the
appropriation
same-
transfer.
Yeah, we transferred money to pay for it.
So we must have gotten them if there's nothing left in,
Yeah, that's generally a $10,000 a year expenditure. It's really an operating cost.
It should be,
It should be an operating.
So we spent it for this year, we're putting it in again next year.
Yeah, because every year he needs to replace $10,000 worth because of the problems with topography here.
just a detail, why is it 20,000 here in the, whatever column that is? Right after the red, year-end appropriation, it's $20,000.
I don't know that.
Okay, that's fine. Fire turnout gear, that's another one of those things that's every year
Yeah.
for 3 years, I guess, is what we're planning. So, and that was appropriated through a transfer. The ambulance, we apparently, we did do that, and we still have 8,000 left. So it's a closed item, so to speak, but there's still some money left, maybe they wanna do something with the ambulance itself. Safety radios, also, there's a case where they wanted radios and we provided the 26,000. And then the front end loader, we actually did. So that's from last year, great, thank you.
we also have, on the elementary school, is the security system.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think we
Second
have
page,
this
yeah.
more.
This-
Oh,
There's
thank you.
more.
I think it was during the town hall.
Yeah.
That was at the bottom of it.
Just
Oh, yeah.
because these are significant.
So they're waiting to, first of all, they're waiting to buy the scrubber and they're waiting to do those security systems from what I see. The only,
The scrubber, they've
No, they
already,
bought it
they've got the
already.
scrubber already.
oh, that's right.
My
there's
guess
nothing
is
in
they
there.
probably have a consultant working on putting in the security cameras.
Okay.
Those are more involved because they
Right,
have
they're
to tie into a
complicated.
fairly complex communication system within the building.
Is their need from us lowered because they got the $35,000 grant for the security cameras?
That's a question I can't answer.
I don't know either. That's it. So the question in that case would be, do they have another 35,000 that would mean they don't need to spend all the 85,000 that was appropriated?
Right.
What was the grant?
$35,000 for security cameras.
Oh, flat out. Oh. Okay.
Well, was that for cameras or the consultation, and consulting?
That's
Usually
something
they bring
to,
it.
that's something to
The
look
wording
into.
said cameras, but, you know, it could be a component of that project.
Part of the
I don't
overall
know.
contract includes spending.
But I would imagine that when they were asking for this money, it included the consultation as well, because they needed
Yeah.
both components in order to.
I just know from experience that that takes a long time and they bring in people to make sure they are citing them properly and they're integrated into an overall system.
And the other thing too, and I don't know the specifics on this, but I know sometimes these systems, they get tied into the rec or something or other, so that they can see things, and that's a whole part of the process.
Do they have to use the funds in that fiscal year?
No.
No, not
These are
really.
warrant article appropriations, not
Carries
budget
until-
appropriation.
It has to be spent on what it was appropriated for.
But not in a year?
If eventually the need goes away, somebody gave us $100,000 for security cameras, then that's one of those articles that would come up at the end and say, we'd like to close that fund and reappropriate or transfer
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was a timing issue.
it. No, it means they can spend it at that point, but it's gonna sit there and we've sort of set it aside, if you will.
Okay, the first two on library were essentially remanded to the library budget to deal with painting of the periodicals room, et cetera. The installed doors, ADA, the comment is that they're looking for a grant on that. There isn't a certain thing like it's not leaking and you have to fix it right away, but it's something that we want to do, so they're looking for the grant. But then the last item is the $10,000 for the repair, but it looks at this point like perhaps they did the repair and we only really needed about 5,000, so that might be good news. But do you think the repair's pretty much done?
Well,
I mean,
she put in for repairs, roof repairs for next year, but the bigger issue is, as we get to it, is the intrusion of moisture into the ground of the building.
Okay, which is a totally separate thing from it. But could we use some of this 4,000, so to speak, for the, if
For
what
roof
was planned, if what was planned already is done, then is that money available to apply to this year's request for roof work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, there is no request this year for roof work. They're looking at big numbers out a couple of years. They're all they're requesting in capital for this year is 15,000 for security cameras.
I actually think if you look at this cover sheet,
Didn't security facility dude want to do the slate roofs
I
or
think
something?
on one of them, yeah, it's facility did, it said roof repairs, but according to facility did, library, landscaping, the bigger problem, I've seen roof repairs
It says
somewhere,
site drainage evaluation
Yeah,
with an
it's-
$8,000.
is the
$7,000.
moisture coming in through
Yeah,
the lower
that's
part of the building.
7,000.
And that needs to be done before we can do the number one item here. So even though it lists number one, landscape, drainage, swale, concrete replacement, I spoke with Paul, and he said, this part here, engineer, civil site, storm drainage, evaluate, report needs to be done before they go and do the repairs that need to be repaired.
It might be worth having another discussion with David Strawn about the investment funds for the library. There's an awful lot of money there.
There's 200 and, I gave it to you, it's like 400,000, it's in
It's in
the
your,
spreadsheet.
it's in the spreadsheet.
For repair work. And I know
Well-
there have
Well,
been.
there's a Gould
The Gould.
trust,
The Gold Trust is
and the
one
maintenance part of it, when I put together this plan, I suggest that that money be used for maintenance and improvements,
See,
because that's really what it was.
The issue
set
is,
aside
it was
for.
to protect the collections. And so if you get new shelves, you paint the room and make the collections more accessible, that has been, as I've understood it, kind of the attitude on how they want to spend that funding. They've not looked at replacing the roof or roof repairs as directly related to protecting the collection, whereas we felt they should because they have a lot more money than.
They should.
Well, and too, it's protecting the collections.
Exactly.
Because if you have
I
mold
agree.
and leaking, everything's at risk.
But it's a political argument in town.
And that's why
It
both,
shouldn't be though.
It is though. It's
no,
unfortunately.
it shouldn't be, you were right about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. but-
And so you'll see when, in this spreadsheet, I've listed their security cameras and site drainage evaluation to come out of the Gold Trust. That's what it's there for.
Yeah.
You can't be a dog in the manger.
You're protecting the whole building, and
Right,
essentially, the Gould Trust, to the extent that it can, should continue to be the primary support for the library. We pay for the staff.
here it is, right up here, $450,000 they've got in
And
there.
I know in the past that Laura has been the one to discuss this with the board. She may need the help of our board and the town
Right.
administrator to make the case.
Actually, I think the library trustee board,
Yeah,
Laura will
that
work with them, but they have worked with the trustees directly too.
But they've not had any progress.
Yeah, I just meant
So
communication.
maybe some additional support is necessary for the library in order
In
to access
terms
those.
convincing.
Convincing to access those funds.
Yeah, I think one of my sense, as I recall from town meeting, was that people assumed that the library couldn't or wouldn't do it. They didn't quite understand the Gould Trust. And the idea was that if they didn't fix the roof, the books will get wet, as opposed to they have the ability to take money from funds they already have, but are just reluctant to do it if they can get the town to pay for it. That's kind of a pejorative view, but that's how I was hearing it. So they got
From
the
the
town.
town's people, who has that point of
The
view?
people at the town meeting, the impression that I think they voted on the basis of was that the town should support the library, and indeed we should. But if the library has an ability to support itself, which was, I don't think, adequately conveyed, doesn't mean it would support it entirely, but for things like that, the library, those funds are there specifically to do those kinds of things. And I think one of the reasons that that did get voted in is because people thought, gee, if we don't fix the roof, the books are gonna get wet.
Yeah, my take on it was not that they thought Laura didn't want to spend the money, but if the fund, the Gould Fund, was not going to fund it, someone had to protect the
I
library.
think that the focus should be on the trustees. I think they need to be aware that those funds need to be used to protect, and in fact, both of these items, including the security cameras, because items are being stolen out of the library.
So I think a discussion with that board
Yeah.
would be helpful in our.
Probably good, we
moving
have
forward.
the option, and I'm not saying this is how we should go, but we have to approve a warrant going, an article going in the warrant. And if it's something for the library, other than a citizen's petition, if we don't put it on, then it has to get funded some other way. But I think we need to talk with them about what's the long-term approach that would be more collaborative and
I would
cooperative.
suggest, as you go through here, when you get to the point that you have to know where you stand on these items, is to make recommendations on this. You know, written recommendations from your board. Because I always have felt that both the town budget and the capital plan is really a document that should come from the Board of Selectmen. You know, and you should either endorse it or offer your own recommendations.
We're trying to start to move in that direction.
I know.
And that's what, we haven't done this kind of a review of the capital plan since, I don't think since I've been on the board. And I'm not sure it was ever done before there. I think we need to get ahead of it, and as we look out further, that informs decisions we make today.
The one thing to be aware of is that this is the commissioners of the trust decision based on their reading of whatever
I
their
understand.
trust responsibilities
Oh, yeah.
are. So we can have our thoughts as to what it is, and we can interpret it as we think, but it is it's just their responsibility. We should be aware that that's, and it's good to get together with them and find out why they think this or that, and the way they read their responsibility for this bequeath or that bequeath or whatever the case
And
may
Catherine
be.
has some of the original documents relating to that trust, and I might have put one in your file there, as school trust.
I do know, talking with Laura as well, that I believe there's a legal opinion that was made a couple of years ago, a few years
Yeah.
ago, that did weigh in on that. We can dig deeper into it as part of the conversation.
So there's a couple of things. One is the original bequeath, the other is the effect that the trustees went to probate and got permission to use it in a way that was maybe not quite as questioned, because they couldn't do it. Probate agreed that you could use the funds that way, so there's that. Then KP was asked to weigh in a year ago, and they came back with a KP kind of a thing, what do you want to hear? Okay, here it is. But we need to be aware that the guiding ones are original, and then the special probate one, those are the guiding ones. Then we have an opinion from our council, but that's an opinion, it has no weight as far as what the trustees have to do or can do.
Certainly.
They can use it to advantage if they want to, or disregard it and say, we do not agree. Remember, council only councils, they do not make you do something, you go to them, and executives have to make the decisions always.
I also feel that at some point it would be helpful, because I like to go to source documents, to compile, and Catherine has some of them, but to compile a manual or electronic document on the trusts, to go back and see. I think she's done some work to say, what is expendable and what isn't. And so that you have some source document about, you can go to and identify all the trusts and when, because they're not all under the trust fund commissioners, but to find out what was expendable, what wasn't, because there are a lot of trusts in this town, and it would be helpful to know that.
And with the size of the expenditures that are coming down, I think we have to dig a little deeper and get a little more creative, always following the wishes of the trust
Right.
fund, the original intent, but to see what else is available so that we don't keep putting it on the taxpayer.
Maybe I could summarize. The key trusts are all of the ones that are under the commissioners of the trust. Some are $500,000, $1 million, whatever trust quantities, and other ones are maybe $5,000, whatever. But as a group, they're all under those. The other major one is the perpetual care, which is
Right.
part of the cemeteries.
Right,
In addition, there are some donation funds within Treasury, which are not trusts at all.
Yeah.
They're simply accounts, for example, like the tree on the common for the holidays. And we have that particular one. And then we also, no, that's, so we have a number of,
We have a
few,
number of
but those
them.
are not trusts. They're simply accounts into which money
I
has
know.
been given for a particular
but we have a
purpose.
printout of all the special revenues and the trusts.
Oh, good.
And all of that, but I think going back to looking at their purposes and what was originally bequested and identifying what is expendable and doing that every year should be, it would be very helpful in addressing some of these needs.
Okay, and then I think it closes out looking at this year's thing, so to speak, with the water department. And I gather that they haven't spent much of that yet.
Yeah, I didn't get into the water too much because I understand the water
Right.
commissioners.
But the water system improvements, that was just a general article that, actually I had something to do with. The water system improvements is this. They went to bid, do some work, it included this, and this, and then they found out that they really wanted a little bit, they wanted to do a little bit more in stubs going into some of the side streets, and it wasn't approved. So we created this thing, which was, in addition, you can do some small improvements without specifically saying what they are beforehand. So that's their kind of a slush fund. It was a purpose for it. $100,000 out of the millions that they spend on piping seemed like a reasonable amount. But that's all that'll just fill that one up. The meters, they haven't done anything with that. North Street, they're drilling, they haven't done anything. And then Prospect Street and River Road improvements, they've apparently spent some, I don't know how much is left. Well, we know how much is left, I'm not sure how much they still need to spend out of that $220,000. And then, that was it. And then the last thing, it does show the front loader, their particular part of the front loader, which we know we did buy. So highways, it was 165,000, I think. 15 was from water, and the rest was from highway.
I would think next year too, it would be
Okay.
helpful for Kevin to meet with the commissioners and get more details on that, but we just really didn't have the time for that.
And I didn't need to spend quite this much time, but now we can go back onto where we're
Yeah.
going for the coming year.
So, thank you, Dick, that helps ground us going forward. So the next question is, Robin, I'm wondering if you can lead us into the planning piece. I have town of Topsfield. Was that a parting gift, Topsfield?
No, that was, these came from Catherine, so. I would not, I think more attention needs to be paid in some of the details here, because if you look at the police requests, they need to spell check in a
Yeah.
big way. So, let me just say that as I approach this, I didn't look out to fiscal '22 and beyond, because I think some discussions need to happen with the finance committee about funding capital, because every year they put money into the capital stabilization fund and into the stabilization fund, small amounts. But they have no designated purposes for those funds. If you have a capital stabilization fund, presumably you're going to use that for a capital plan. I think some discussion with the finance committee about taking a portion, and some communities use like 1%, 1.5%, taking a portion every year and putting that towards capital. Now, what I can tell you that I implemented in Ipswich is we actually started increasing that amount. We would put money into capital every year and draw that down, so it was sort of a you could treat it a little bit like a revolving fund. But anything that wasn't spent from those funds would go back into the capital stabilization fund. So it didn't just disappear into free cash.
Residuals from a
Yes.
project, if it was a $50,000 appropriated, but
Right.
you only used 45, the 5,000 was collected up and put into the
Put
capital.
back in there. So we could actually build it up over time, which we did, until we had about $1 million, 1.2, 1.5 million every year available in capital. But it takes sort of a longer range plan on that. So my first recommendation is that, really, the finance committee needs to stop dumping money in that. It just gets hoarded. It's great. I actually think your stabilization fund is more than sufficient. But as you put money into capital stabilization, what is the plan for that? Is it?
You're saying general stabilization is good,
It's good.
capital stabilization, you have a question. Let me offer this thought, that the legislation as intended when they did this idea of having a capital stabilization, as I understand it, and almost as it reads, was for a particular purpose. You might have 5 capital stabilization funds if necessary, but they were for a particular purpose. We know we're gonna have to get a new school in 10 years. It's gonna cost, we're told, something like $20 million, whatever. So we're not gonna be able to pay for it all, we'll have to bond some of it, but why don't we put in $250,000 a year for the next 10 years, and then we'll have $2.5 million towards the 20 million, and that's the kind of concept, I think,
But that's almost, I have to say, that's almost ludicrous, because meanwhile, your other buildings are falling into disrepair. So I think that to say, oh, we only have to bond this amount, bonding's cheap right now. And you can spread it out over time. One thing I think should be included in here is the debt schedule, so you know where you can insert that debt. But there's insufficient money set aside for some of the projects that are coming up. And another way to handle it is to, for example, and Catherine says the finance committee doesn't want to do this because they pay interest, but interest is almost negligible. If you need to buy a fire truck, you can set aside, you can actually buy it on a 5-year lease purchase now. It's become so cheap. And she says, well, the finance committee doesn't want to spend the interest. Well, it's cheaper than bonding it, actually, for bonding costs plus everything else you do. Say it's 3%. On these leases, it's 1.5 to 2%. So you could do a lease purchase and pay for something over 5 years and not impact your available funds substantially in that year, or there would be less of an impact. But I think there needs to be a broader discussion, and I don't think it should be just the finance committee making that decision. I think the selectmen should weigh in on it, because you're the ones ultimately that have to say, well, how are we going to, keep the police station operational? It's, the fact that Evan has been asking for $12,000 a year to fix this is ludicrous. We should just go in and fix the sewer system, Who operates like that?
It is expensive to keep going back in and trying to fix it.
It's like, who does that? Would you do that at home?
Well, can I make a for discussion?
But I
a
think,
thought?
yeah, but what I want to say is, part of the discussion to have is, if it were your house, what would you do? You'd fix your sewers, your plumbing a little bit at a time? No, you wouldn't. So, okay, we won't send the health agent over to Dick's house. But I'm just saying, I've always used this argument at town meeting. If this were your house, how would you handle this?
One of the things, having
Town meeting may have it.
with John Guido, I do get the sense that I brought up the notion of doing a stabilization fund, and the resistance comes on the basis of they think the voters should look at every single thing and be able to have a decision on each one. If you put in the stabilization fund, that's a big number and then it gets taken out, but it doesn't go through town meeting to take it out.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Oh, it has
It
to.
does?
It
Oh, absolutely.
absolutely does, it requires a 2/3 vote, John should know that.
Okay, so he would, I think, I interpreted, and obviously I misinterpreted to some extent, that it was sort of a keep a little more
It is not a
control if they do
revolving
it.
fund, both of those require 2/3.
That's good,
vote.
okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm
No, 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 I
shocked
think,
to hear that.
no, no, well, and that's my, don't put that on John, put that on me, not being clear on that, so I appreciate having that clarified.
I'd like to offer this as a thought for discussion, maybe not now, but for discussion at some point. That the capital stabilization fund be looked at as a facility capital stabilization. In other words, if somebody needs a roof, it can come out of that. If somebody needs a police car, it doesn't come out of that.
No, it doesn't.
Well, that's not what it could be right now. And even if we said it, if we decided
Not if-
that, it's not a trust, so people could use it however they want. I mean, town meeting could use it however they want. But it would seem to me from an attitude point of view, since there's been a lot of concern from facility dues did not look at any rolling stock. They're only looking at the facilities, and they've come up with $4 million over 10 years or whatever else. So, perhaps setting aside that kind of money, and then if something happens, you have that money to draw down for for the purpose of facilities versus anything for capital.
And to also consider, 5-year purchase plans for large rolling stock, if you will. One of the things, when I put together this plan, I made that very distinction. Free cash they appropriate every year, I understand, 300,000 for, and then they put 25 into whatever amount they put into capital stabilization. Into that 300,000 or thereabouts, 313,000 it comes out to. I followed sort of that plan, which is unique purchases that are sort of one-time or finite or building-related. Every year, apparently, you raise and appropriate other sums. And into that, I think things like the police cruiser should be done because police cruisers aren't really capital. They're operational, and the turnout gear and the $10,000 a year for radio replacements. All that should be in your operating budgets because a cruiser is not capital. It doesn't last more than 3 years. It doesn't last 5 years. They turn over so quickly because they put so many miles on them. So I would see that those kinds of items and some building maintenance repairs should be in the under raise and appropriate because the town should be funding on a regular basis minor repairs and renovations. Those aren't particularly capital, but like the library roof repair, there should be a sum of money every year that you'll use towards repairs. When a whole system needs replacement, for example, a roof, then you might take it out of capital. But you sort of have these buckets that you need to consider. One is, what should we be setting aside every year for repairs and upgrades of buildings? And maybe facility dude will take you to that. What systems need to be replaced? And that's not a repair, it's like you may have to replace a roof system, you may have to, I look at that as a system-wide thing. Even IT can be considered that because you're replacing a whole system, not just a computer here, a computer there, a software here. It's a whole system. And then the third bucket is what are your big capital purchases, and that could be equipment. It could be like the schools looking at their grounds to do some major ADA compliance work. But I kind of look at buckets like that. What should be operational? what are systems that need to be replaced, and what are the big ticket items out here. And within the scope of what I understand the finance committee has been doing, I tried to insert items that were most critical. And the ones that I think should be recurring costs and money put in or should have been funded for normally out of repairs, I put under raise and appropriate, the general fund, and then the rest I put under capital. And I think you could argue them back and forth this way and that way, but for example, the schools are doing this ADA feasibility study. Well, that I put under capital, under the free cash, which the finance committee considers capital, because it's the first phase of a large project. But the master clock system, all that needs to be replaced. It's a system, put it into free cash, which I think they consider their.
If it's a one-time, they're gonna do it 30 years from now, the next time, so
Yeah.
don't put it in. You made an interesting suggestion, and that is that the operating budgets need to have something for maintenance, and I think we've mentioned this before. And I just happen to have from the past, I wish I could put it up on the screen real quick, but I went through existing budgets about a year or two ago to see what was in there for maintenance purposes, but just there's 11 that I came up with, there may be others or whatever, but one is town repairs and maintenance, 19,000, town maintenance buildings, oops, this doesn't count. Police maintenance building is 14,000, police maintenance heating and tanks is 2,000, fire is 10,000, highway maintenance is 5,000, park and cemetery is 4,000, library anticipated is 22,000, unanticipated is 16,000. And then library maintenance buildings is another 1,000. Of all of them, library is the one. So maybe the issue is they have budgets, but maybe they need bigger amounts in those budgets.
One of the things that I found when I was working in sorting out facilities is a lot of times they put things in maintenance that might be elevator maintenance, elevator inspections, or
Yes.
fire extinguisher inspections, which happen every year. It may not really include the kind of maintenance that buildings need unforeseen. So when they budget, there's a difference between these are our foreseen costs, and then what do we put in here to, I don't know, replace the exit lights, or, because that's the other part that's unforeseen. That's the other part that gets neglected. So even though they have that in there, it's been my experience a lot of times, it's for things that you would not normally consider minor repairs. It's for the bills you get, the heating, the lights, the this, the that. In this capital plan, under raise and appropriate, I put a sum of 25,000 in just as miscellaneous building repairs. But the other thing I did, and I've done this before, is under capital, I put project reserve, because sometimes projects come in a little bit more than you expected. They're approved projects. It's not meant to be, oh, well, we have this other thing come up, so let's spend it on this. Now, we had a very difficult time coming up with a number to replace the tight tank at the fire department. Right now, that's not in compliance with DEP. It's a major issue that needs to be resolved. Facility dude came in with a number of 12,000. And Jen had a number of 27. And David had talked to Jen, but David had not had conversations with Paul. Part of it is getting the right people around the table, if you will. So finally we came in with a right number, which was 28.5. Everybody agrees on that. But had it been put in at 27 and it came in at 28.5, you don't have that extra flexibility. So that's when a project reserve would come in handy. it's an amount to be drawn down in the event that one of the projects, once its bid comes in higher than anticipated, which does happen.
How have we handled that in the past? Because I'm sure we've run over budget in some areas. Do we just transfer from another account to cover it? How is
Well,
it covered?
As a matter of fact, I guess I
Because you
shouldn't
can
say no.
transfer within a category.
There have been occurrences where we're allowed to, not so much transfer it into that account, but so to speak, take this piece, and that's not really part of that project, but I have money in my budget, I can go do it. Because you really should not spend money on a project that was not, if this is the project and you told the town, this is how much it costs, and then it costs more, it's up to the town to say, at that price, it's not worth it. Now, the issue of another $500, it's not much, but still, that's the way it is. So what you need to do, though, is go in with more than you need, you think, so you have some cushion, and then what's left over after the project is done, you do what Robin said, you put it in the capital stabilization fund. No, but we have taken them out and we've typically used it, but the idea is you have to put enough in, and the people have to agree to it. Let me
Okay, then
explain.
this wouldn't address that then.
Well, in
If
some
you said
cases,
people, said you could spend 27 and you spent 28, whether it comes from the special bucket or it comes from some other
Well, this-
category.
well, now
Well,
we're,
this special bucket could be termed such that it could be used for any project that is over what was appropriated.
right.
You could do that, that's how you can legally get around it.
Well, that's the problem with Facility Dude, is because they're working with a group out of South Carolina. And the costs down there to repair something, a lot less in terms of trades, and you don't pay prevailing wages. So, in trying to get this one project accurate, took a week and a half. And so I think that until we have a better sense of, they say Facility Dude is completed, I sent it out to everybody. But I still think having a project reserve in there is good, because you never know what the environmental conditions might be too. Oh, we went in there, we found asbestos. Whoop, we went in there and we found X, Y, or Z. I think having a project reserve is good, but it rolls over year to year.
How confident are you of the numbers going into the budget now, Robin, with that issue of the South Carolina prices?
Paul's been working with them on that. And he went back and worked with them on a couple issues, because we discovered that they didn't include plumbing, they didn't include systems like the tight tank, some things were overlooked, so
They
he's.
caught a lot, but not everything is the point.
That's right,
Okay.
that's right. So, I think Paul's made a good faith effort to get this up, and I know he's been talking to people at Facility Dude. But I think it's something that needs to be looked at annually. I was thinking the other night whether there was is there a factor and by which you say every year it'll cost us much more? And I don't know that that's built into that, but you might want to check with Paul. In other words, what is the escalating factor in here? This is a picture now. This is right now. But you're going to use this as a plan to the future, so what would the number be every year for this? And that might be something to talk to Paul about.
What were you actually pointing to? Which document?
This is the short
Oh,
version
yes,
of what
got
they're
it.
recommending
Yep,
this
yes,
year.
got it.
They actually, he sat down with Donna and they came up with 4 highlights, and when I looked at this, I'm like, we have enough money because you're not buying that giant piece of highway equipment, which they want another big piece next year. That's why I think you should set aside money every year towards these. Because it cripples the rest of the budget. They want $100,000 next year, the highway department.
For the sidewalk
Yeah.
plow?
Yeah, and it just cripples the rest of the budget. So I think that we were able to add in a couple more things. They said these were the critical issues, but we had enough, and I felt it was important to add in a few more things in terms of getting those projects done. So I would like to say I'm more confident because he's discovered, you know, and worked on this, but you just don't know. There are so many unforeseen conditions. You know, for example.
He being Paul.
Yeah, but, you know, like I said, you can open a wall and find asbestos, and then it's a remediation project. One of the things they are doing with this tight tank is they're not going to remediate whatever's in there, they're just going to build a new one. Because otherwise, then you might have potential contaminants, and sometimes it's best just to put a lid on it.
Literally.
Well,
Yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of the things that Facility Dude found, was it because people had previously known about these issues, but there wasn't the money, or had it not been looked at before? There was nobody really looking with an eye towards the facility maintenance.
Most departments focus on their operations. And they can say, oh, the boiler is really bad, but I really need the cruiser, you know, or,
When the boiler breaks, they're gonna have to bail us out, is a little bit of the feeling. And so we'll go and ask for it then, because nobody's gonna say, well, gee, we can't have a police station that freezes.
You can't
I
really-
mean that, you know, not everybody feels quite that way, but I think there's been a little bit of that attitude, that when it comes up, we'll just ask for it, so I'll have to pay it.
well, people get hired to be police chiefs and fire chiefs, not to be facility managers. And
Yeah.
so, also if it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
If the water turns on and the water comes out, it's not a problem. When the water doesn't come out, now it's a problem. And they call the local plumber, who comes in and fixes it to get the water going, but not to fix the problem, which is why we've had these ongoing issues.
So I think it's with this information gathered, and now that you have the final, you know, report, which, by the way, I haven't seen. It's 150 pages. Didn't have the chance to read it. That escalator may be in there, but I think it's probably a good time for the board to meet with the finance committee and talk about capital, and whether it's this budget, which could be part of it, or a long-term capital strategy to address the issues that are coming up.
Sometimes,
And even the school committee, actually, because they've got some things.
I know capital is always a big issue in this town, but I know from experience, in an age when construction costs, depending upon region, are going up by 6 to 12% per year, bringing in a project a year or two earlier than complete failure, planning it out, but getting it done sooner, you pay much less in financing than you do in waiting until the price goes up. And I know at Masco, that was part of what we were looking at. Now, the problem there was that we couldn't get the buy-in from the towns. And so hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more than $1 million, will end up being spent because people weren't willing to go ahead and do it when they could.
No, I understand.
And it'll come back to the towns in any case, but it's a difficult case to make for people who don't kind of understand it.
I think people get, when they look at the numbers, the bottom line, oh, 4 million, 2.6 billion, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
You know, I always remind people you have to take it a bite at a time, and the more that you get through, the smaller the list behind you becomes. You know, you can say, wow, we've done this, and, you know, you get to measure things, and you have fewer things go wrong. So I do think there's an opportunity to have a broader discussion about what exactly are you doing with those funds? What do you plan to, why squirrel it away? It's much better to go out and bond for a big project than it is to try to save money and then meanwhile neglect some other major issues.
The other point I'd make too is that sometimes spending a little bit more now with current technology, you can build with such much better quality that on certain things, not rubber membrane roofs because they're what they are, but other things you can now get better performance over a longer period of time. So the good news is that quality replacement and rebuilding of many things will actually end up longer lasting than the original.
Well, when you say that, what are you thinking of?
So for instance, if you do a brick wall now and the quality of insulation on the
Yeah.
inside, the quality of waterproofing on the inside, the quality of structural members and so on, they build in steel, not timber. So all kinds of things end up being better. And there's just a lot more technology. Things are more efficient and so on. So ultimately, those are all things that need to be taken into consideration, and we don't really have an established process for doing that.
You've adopted policies, but you need to have a bigger
Needs to be an
vision
ongoing
of-
conversation.
of how you're going to address capital needs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, we could start it today, but it's probably gonna take a while before we get it down.
Yeah.
Our challenge is, right now, that we need to come up with what our recommendations are for capital, so that the FinCom can begin to deal with them. And we probably need to do that ideally, really, within the guidelines that the FinCom has given. So that's why we should kind of make it down through the list of what your recommendations are.
All right.
The two things now with your recommendations, as I see it, are two columns. One is, it's called free cash, and the other is raise and assess. They don't necessarily see it as free cash. They don't always do it out of free cash. I think sometimes they do a raise and assess.
They do.
But
They split it up.
300,000 is the total that they've typically looked at. What, as you said, with your wording, traditional, something like that.
Yeah.
I should know the answer to this, but what are their guidelines officially this year? Did they say 300,000?
I just know traditionally they have spent 300,000
right.
from free cash for capital,
Okay.
and they've also dipped into raise and appropriate for capital.
And we have 525, that's what's on the plate for this coming year. For excluding water. So that includes,
Okay, can I do a couple real quickies?
I just wanna make sure I understand it before you do that. Is that the number we're shooting towards here?
This is the number, these combined numbers, I should have gone across and come up with a total here, but
Is this booklet, does it match, is that?
no, because some of those things I didn't recommend in the first year.
So one of the things on that spreadsheet that we have is that the first item on the town hall is not in that total. The 312 should be 342, another 30,000. It's just that the formula didn't pick it up.
Oh, it didn't.
What are you looking at there?
This is that.
Oh, the,
That one.
okay, yeah.
This is the same as this, or did this get changed?
This is the same. The 30,000 didn't get picked up, did?
No, just click on the formula, you see it didn't pick it up.
My bad.
Well, it happens. And it's a nit out of, whether it's 312 or 342, I mean, it's in the same category. Yeah.
So that's the town hall and library phone system.
That particular item is. The second thing is that the record management scanner in one place is written as 35,000. I think it was in the
That's
transmittal
right.
letter. So I'm not sure which it is. Is it 30 or 35?
We settled on 30. That's a number that came from Donna. I'm not sure how much she researched it.
Again, it's a relative nit. It's only 5,000, but we should be aware that there's some question there.
There are differences between this and this, because I got